Hey everybody, Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, and today I want to talk about this book. So some of you may remember that a while ago I was talking about the Fallout Wasteland Warfare miniatures game by Modiphius, and then really quickly after that I did a review of the Elder Scrolls Call to Arms, basically not Skyrim miniatures game, and I talked about them both at length. They're two very similar game systems. They work almost a lot like role-playing games, like tabletop RPGs, in terms of like having a skill dice and ways of modifying that. And I really fell in love with the system. Between the two of them though, I have been utterly smitten by Call to Arms, the Skyrim version. I'm going to call it the Skyrim game every once in a while. It just happens because that's what all the models are really set from. It is a terrific miniatures game, and I think a really exciting skirmish level game to be more on point. And so I've been playing quite a bit of it myself. One of the coolest things about that game system is that it does have a single player mode. That is to say, there are very, very complex and deep toolboxes of how the AI can respond to you, meaning for each faction, let's say like Dark Brotherhood, Imperial, Stormcloaks, Draugr, all those are different factions for the purposes of this. They'll all have different responses based on what the game is, what the mission is, all those kinds of things. So they play differently, and it makes it a very fun and rewarding solo game experience. Now, I've kind of been keeping that on the down low, not telling a ton of people about it because I've just been enjoying myself, and it's something I can put down and pick up at my own leisure. But now that I'm more comfortable with the game, I am going to be talking about it a lot here on the channel because I really do like it as a miniatures game, and it's given me a reason to paint some of the coolest minis ever. I mean, like the Skyrim miniatures, like the miniatures of characters from Skyrim for Call to Arms, they're fantastic. Modiphius did a stellar job with so many of the sculpts that they're just so much fun to paint. If you want to see what I mean, there's a link in the description down below. It is an affiliate link, so at no cost to you, it'll actually save you some money. It'll give you a discount, and then using that link for your purchases goes a long way to supporting me and the channel. If you want to use it, if not, that's totally cool. Thank you so much to everyone who does though. Now, with that being said, the core set for the Call to Arms game, it's been reviewed a whole bunch of times. There's lots of videos on it. I might do another one in the future. Let me know if you want me to do that. But for the very, very simple, I guess, introduction, it gives you like a few quests to do for both what they call battle mode, which is you versus another person in competitive lists, or not competitive lists, but like matched, point values. But there's also what they call delve mode, which is what the human versus AI, or I actually got a game in with my wife, so we were on one team fighting the AI together. And so that's a great way to get your spouse into the game. It sounds silly, but it's really, really cool. But the problem is that it was the quest book, which had all the missions for you, was a little bit limited. And so when they came out with Histories of the Empire Volume 1, The Stormcloak Rebellion, I was very excited. Simply put, this is a campaign booklet that gives you just a lot more options to play and ways to represent different parts of Skyrim itself. So what I'm going to do is go to the downward cam, walk through kind of the broad strokes of this book, who's it for, what's in it, and how can you use it to have some really fun storytelling games. I think you'll see for the price point, I think it's like 23 bucks. This is a stellar deal. So here we are at the downward cam to give you the most possible brief introduction to what's going on. They do a good job in these two little pages, but this essentially takes place before and during and up to the end of the Civil War within Skyrim. For those of you who don't really know, the Empire, as we know it, sort of like I guess from Oblivion and Morrowind, the Empire was sort of like the main government body of the entire setting, and they were attacked by a set of high elves. Okay, they came to a condition called the White Gold Concordant, which essentially let the Empire exist, and they kind of stopped the wars, like a cease and desist between the Aldmeri Dominion and the Empire, settled down the arguments, but the catch was humans could no longer worship the deity known as Talos, who is a man who ascended into godhood. Now, this is particularly bad for the people of Skyrim, as they do worship Talos. So the whole reason that this whole civil war happens is because of the Aldmeri Dominion wars going on. Some people in one region of Skyrim, known as the Reach, had a little uprising. Okay, all the troops were being deployed elsewhere to go fight the elves, and so these guys had their own little revolution. Well, one hero on the clear other side of Skyrim, Ulfric Stormcloak, says to the leader of the Reach, I'll come in and I'll squash this rebellion for you. But you need to join me in saying that we need to have the right to worship Talos. Now, I love that setup because it's a very understandable one. We've seen wars like that happen in our own world where there's a restriction on religious freedoms. Some empire with a strong religious tone comes in and says, no, we're going to worship however we want to worship, and a massive civil war ensues. Those things happen in our own history. And so it's a very cool, deep story. It's unfortunately not highlighted enough, I feel, in Skyrim, but that's what triggers the entire thing. Ulfric comes over. He squashes what we now call the Forsworn, which is a sub-faction in Skyrim, and gives the region back to its rightful ruler, the Jarl. The Jarl then turns around and backstabs him and says, hey, he said he's going to worship Talos, and now the Empire, having settled the problems with the White Gold Concordant, now turns its eye to Ulfric and says, you can't be worshipping that. Because now the Empire's position is, we either need to quash this rebellion and honor the White Gold Concordant, or we need to side with them and we need to go toe-to-toe with the Altmerry Dominion. And neither of those propositions is fun. So what we get to play as is the Empire trying to squash the Stormcloak Rebellion, or you flip it, you're the Stormcloaks trying to fight for your right to worship a Talos. So that's my hyper brief. I know I got some details wrong. Tell me in the comments if you have more you want to add, but that's the short of it, right? It's about religious worship of a certain deity. The elves don't like us worshiping Talos. It's the Skyrimian right to do so. Now, to introduce the game to you, let's see, I know there's a map here somewhere. Haha! We have here on the back page a map of Skyrim. If you've never seen or really seen like the areas all divided up, because I know the mini map in the game doesn't do a great job, but this is what the whole thing looks like. There are 9 territories: Hoffinger, Hjalmarch, the Reach, which this is the area where Ulfric was a hero / traitor simultaneously, Whiterun, Falkreath, the Rift, Eastmarch, Winterhold, and the Pale. 9 areas. When the campaign starts, you don't worry about this map too much, but essentially the first act of the campaign ends with you fighting for Whiterun. That's going to be important here in a second. But that's the map of the region, and we'll revisit this here in a sec. Now, how does the campaign actually function? Well, for starters, there are environment rules for every single region of Skyrim. Like I said, there's 9 of them. So each of the 9, like here's Hoffinger, Hallmarch, the Pale. You get a sense that obviously the map's on the back if you want to see the full picture again. But let's pick the Reach. The Reach is my favorite section of Skyrim because I love the mix of craggy mountains and deep valleys and rivers and stuff like that. So for example, in their special, specific rules, depending on if you're playing in a town or in the forest, you'll see these little icons here, and that'll give you some rules to work with. So for example, it's constantly downpouring, so there's a penalty to all morale checks because people are already feeling defeated. Sheer cliffs basically makes it more terrain difficult to get around. Like normally you can climb over things, and this is saying nope, we're pretending it's all sheer cliff faces, so you can't climb up and over anything. And then there are Forsworn Raiders, which is if you get too close to particular sides of the battlefield. Thematically, it's that the Forsworn are harassing you, like shooting arrows at you from the sidelines, and you can take damage attacks from them, which is really cool. But you have things like avalanches in Winterhold, where it's all frozen and snowy. There's a Dragon's Lair in Eastmarch. And so you kind of get a feel. They're trying to give you a basic vibe for each of the various regions. And what's cool about this is even if you're not playing in the campaign, you can just pick these rules up. None of them are tied to the campaign rules. So if you just want to play in a whole bunch of games in the Rift, here you go. You don't need anything else. You could just literally just copy this and you're good to go. And I like that. I like that their utility exists so that it's not all wrapped up in the campaign. Like it adds value outside of this specific campaign booklet. Now let's keep going. We're going to talk about the Stormcloak Rebellion campaign from a mechanic perspective. Perspective. There we go. Act 1, just to kind of clarify, they break the entire war into 3 acts. Okay, Act 1 is the eve of war, to where things reach their kind of like tipping point and all-out war is declared. Act 2 sees you and the opponent fighting for territories. Like we have that big map in the back. You're going to be fighting over these. That's why it has 4 in red, 4 in blue. Over on the blue side is Ulfric's Stormcloak. Over on the right side where it's red on the left side where it's red is going to be the Imperials, and you're fighting over Whiterun initially. If you're not familiar with the game story, you do a whole bunch of like back and forth, trying to like solidify your power, but the actual war aspects don't fully kick in until Whiterun. And that's exactly the same here. So on the eve of war, you are given 3 optional delve scenarios. These is you versus the AI. Okay, you can do one of these before each of the actual main missions. So if you wanted to, at minimum, let's say you didn't like the delve things, you just wanted to play with a buddy, you have to do 2 missions, the Jagged Crown and then the Battle for Whiterun. If you and your friend are cool with it, for example, I could go play Uncover the Truth and then play the Jagged Crown. And then I could do a Test of Courage and then the Battle for Whiterun. And in between those games, the reason that you would add these delve missions in is that the more glory points that you earn, which is just through playing the game, you'll achieve and unlock certain things. The more points that you earn, the more you can spend on rewards later in the campaign. So you're actually rewarded for taking the time to go do all of these optional missions, which feels like a RPG, right? Like that's how I play video games. I do all the side quests first, and then I just pummel the first boss like he didn't exist. It's exactly the same concept. So you have these 3 missions. My understanding from the way it's written is that you can do them. You can only do it once and in between each round. So like you couldn't do all 3 and then go to the Jagged Crown and do all 3 and then Whiterun. You have to pick one, and that's cool. I think it's just their way of kind of keeping it on the rails so you don't get too many victory points or glory points, whatever, out the way. So yeah, these top 3, the Clear the Camp, Uncover the Truth, Test of Courage, they are self-contained missions, and I like them quite a bit because not only do they give you the mission and the setup, but they also give you the exact items that they want you to use, which is very helpful because there's an abundance of cards and stuff like that to keep track of. Giving you a starting direction on good items and quests and stuff like that, I think is a fantastic idea. And also, they work on their own. Each of these is a delve mission. They can just do their own thing. This one is you're sneaking into a camp at night and you're trying to destroy soldiers as they come out of their tents, which is a really cool thing. Uncover the Truth. Yeah, okay, that does have its own list here. This is essentially you're trying to sneak into a camp, specifically sneaking into it. Like there's rules for raising an alarm and patrols and things like that. Test of Courage is more of an all-out brawl. And then you get into the main missions, the Jagged Crown and the Battle for Whiterun. The Jagged Crown, if you're not familiar, is an important artifact signifying the ruler of Skyrim. So you do that in the video game, similar thing here. And it introduces all kinds of fun narrative stuff. For example, you need to have the Ebony Claw, which is a special item that you put in the treasure chest deck. And it also has a puzzle door you have to figure out. There's a bunch of cool things here. I really do like alternate deployment zones, treasure chests galore. I like that one just because it sounds very, very fun. One thing I do want to throw up here, though, that I like a lot is they do give you suggested lists. That is to say, thematically, if you want to do this, they have Legate Ricky, Hadvar, and a couple of Imperial soldiers, and then it gives you the heroes basically from one of the starters. These are the starter sets to get you into the battle and get this rolling. So I like that quite a bit. Nothing much to say beyond that. It's pretty straightforward. You have to go in, first one to grab the artifact is the winner, and there's a whole bunch of other ways to gain VP and stuff like that. The next one is Battle for Whiterun, and in this one you're basically trying to bust open that drawbridge. If you remember from the video game, everything was centered around like, don't let them get past the main fortification gate, even though there's like tons of places to enter Whiterun. That's my opinion. They seemed really worried about this one gate in the front, and that's essentially the area that you are fighting in. And again, it's just trying to keep everybody back. And of course, you can see here, the forces grow a little bit. You don't have to take these exact armies, but what they're doing is suggesting them for you, because if you want one side to be the AI, it gives you the list. So all of these missions, even though some are considered delve and some are battle mode, this, for example, is a battle mode, you and an opponent, there are rules in the back of the book for how to make the entire campaign, every single thing in this book, AI focused. So you can play the entire thing yourself. And so what this is doing is just giving you some list ideas for it. And I think that's awesome. It sets it all up for you to take a lot of the burden off your mind, and you can go in and tweak it as you like. Now, Act 1 is very straightforward. You know, you have the optional delve quest, but really there's only 2 missions, right? You get the crown, you fight for Whiterun. Act 2 is where things get, I'm going to say, very, very interesting. And by that, this is when you and your opponent are fighting for Skyrim itself, okay? I'm gonna go back to our map here just because it's a bit bigger and probably easier to look at for you guys at home. So when Act 2 begins, this is what the map looks like, and whoever won the Battle of Whiterun gets that city as well. So let's say these guys won it, it would be blue. You are going to be fighting your opponent in various places, trying to get to their main base, so to speak. So for example, if you're the Stormcloaks, you want to conquer Hafingar. If you are the Imperials, you want to conquer Eastmarch, because that's where Ulfric is located at. So the way that this works is it's a whole section of the campaign with largely an indeterminate amount of time, but you pick a enemy territory that is adjacent to one of yours. In the case of Hafringer, you can actually attack them from the Pale because they are connected by boatway. That's a very specific thing, but you pick something that's adjacent to you, and then you fight in that regions with the region rules we talked about earlier. So, for example, the Pale, I could have my forces here from Stormcloaks attack Hjalmarch. We would fight on Hjalmarch rules. And then if I won that battle, well, now that this turns blue, I'm now adjacent to Hafengar. I can actually attack them head on. So what you're trying to do is attack and gain these 2 respective places, but you can go anywhere you want. This is interesting because there are some areas it's like, why would you fight for it? It's just because you want to. Like, the Rift offers very minimal value because it's not directly near anything, but it is what it is. So all the regions of the map are on the table. The winner of the Whiterun battle gets that territory as well, but of course that means they can be attacked from any 3 of these. It's a give and take. I think it's a cool thing, and basically you and your opponent are taking turns to be like, who's on the offensive, who's on the defensive, and you're just simulating all these wars happening all over Skyrim. Now, the 3rd act of this does not begin until someone declares an attack on their enemy's home base. Haffinger, Eastmarch. So you have to at least get to those places. Of course, if it's here, they make it clear you do have to, there's some way of writing it, but basically you can't just take Whiterun and go straight to Eastmarch. You have to do some other games too. But that's essentially the idea behind the regions, is you're fighting for control over all of them, and this is where you and your opponent get to like go back and forth. And this is a fun one because it can be over whenever you want it to be. Just keep playing it until you get bored. It's kind of how I would look at it. I would say until you're bored and you've had equal rounds of being attacker and defender, you're good to go. You essentially have to plan an attack. There are special rules in place that you can get based on which hold you're in, because they're trying to reward you, or trying to make the areas feel more like they do in the video games. And so you'll see things like the Bard's College gives you some stuff like things to morale boost just because it's there, it exists. It would have influenced the people of Haffingar, Hjalmarch, there we go. All these names are terrible for me. And just, the Skyforge exists. Why? Because it exists in Whiterun, and they make all kinds of awesome weapons for people, and they would have those. Let's see, and then you move into Act 3. Let's see, here we go. Act 2, Assault the Fort, which is great. These are all different battle plans that you can use in Act 2, and this is when you're doing all of the super crazy battles across Skyrim. And this is really, I think, the meat of the campaign. The other ones are, I feel like Act 1 is introducing you to the concept of it, but Act 2 is where you're going to spend the bulk of the campaign time fighting over individual territories. There's lots of different missions here. Let's see, we're at 6, there's 7. Yeah, so that's 8 battle missions, and of course you can do some, these are standalone delve missions for you to do on your own. There is 3 of those. So like, 11 missions sum total for one section. 1/3 of this campaign is great. And of course, they can be played independently. Like if you and your buddy just want a pickup game, this book facilitates that. It's just a ton of missions to play, and I like it. And then there's Act 3. You have one optional delve scenario where you're fighting the computer, and then you have 3 missions that have to be done concurrently. Not concurrently. Sequentially. There we go. You have to be done in sequence. There's your delve and burn, your basic mission, which is not basic, your delve mission. So you're trying to play against the AI, and then you go into the actual fight. And this looks a little different depending on which region you're attacking, because again, you are using those rules. But this would essentially be the last mission of the Civil War, where you go to fight Ulfric himself or Tullius himself, whatever the case may be. At the end here, there are rules for, there's like stories about the campaign victors and losers. You can extend the campaign, meaning you can trade particular keeps and stuff like that. Let's see. The Stormcloak Rebellion was a long and fruitless stalemate, continually by extending external influences such as Dragon Crisis and Thalmor. Players can extend their campaign if the defender during this scenario is victorious. In this instance, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it's just giving you a chance. You can basically swap some territories to extend the campaign out and give you different areas to fight in. I like that. There's a way to make it a multiplayer campaign, and there's a way to make it a utterly and completely solo campaign. Here's just the rules for modifying that, and it just says, like, Act 1 they choose this, Act 2 they do that. They give you solo play suggested adversary forces, which I for one am very, very grateful for, in the sense that these just make it very simple to, like, okay, I know that I want to play as the Stormcloaks. What do I need for the Legion to be able to have a realistic battle against them? And something that sounds fun. So giving you the lists at various point limits, just so you can play at whatever you want. Slam dunk. Now, the last thing I want to do is talk about the Holdguard faction. It is its own faction. The Holdguard represents the loyal soldiers who keep watch over the province of Skyrim. Each individual hold has their own militia, loyal to its Jarl and the High King of Skyrim. Forced to pick a side during the Stormcloak Rebellion, these men and women now fight to defend the land that they call home. Throughout Act 2 of the Stormcloak Rebellion, during the mustering a 4-step of the campaign turn, the defending player may include models from the Holdguard faction as hirelings. So these are essentially warriors that can fit into any army, is it Legion or Stormcloak, whatever. They do have their own. This is their response matrix, so if you're playing against them, you can still include them. And let's see, for their faction special rules, any Holdguard model within 3 inches of the party champion that would gain a green die for outnumbering an enemy model adds yellow. So they gang up on people really well. I like that. And so they give you your quick adversary cards, so you can either use them. This is where's he at? Yeah, so these 3 are the ones if you want to use them. These are the adversary cards because they have like a little threat level. That's fantastic. Nothing stands out terribly about them, but it does give you a chance to just kind of paint something cool and different. And then, of course, you can play as the Hold Captain himself, who is first and foremost of the guard. So if you wanted to play as an entire guard list, this guy allows you to do that because you need at least 1 hero to match the faction. That's him, and that would be his main. Now, he can be taken in Stormcloaks or Imperial, but he can't be like the party leader. I like him. The Holdguard captain, he's not stellar, but he's a cool hero option for the sake of him existing. He has a cool, let's see, while he was near an NPC token, so like there are some tokens that represent just people fleeing and stuff, he can defend them. I like that. And then there's some rules updates as of January 2021. I didn't realize this book was that old. So that's a very long-winded review of this thing, but let's talk about what it actually adds. Quite a bit. There's rules for each hold, a 3-act story for the main narrative with additional side missions along the way. All of this for like $25 is probably one of the best deals in wargaming right now, to be honest. It's just phenomenal. As far as who's it for, which is kind of a question that I always ask, it's for everybody. This is a book that if you have any interest in Call to Arms, it is for you. I actually think it should be, in my opinion, included in the starter set, simply because, like, get rid of the quest book, put this in there. The reason I say that is because a lot of the burden when it comes to starting the game especially with Delve mode, the solo thing. The rules are kind of scattered when it comes to creating your treasure deck, your quest deck, the event deck. All those things are kind of all over the place. I love that this book points out exactly, these are the cards you take. If nothing else, get you started, right? Get you started quick. These are the cards you take. This is how your force can be set up. Boom, you're good to go. And I like, it does kind of hold your hand through certainly those first missions where it does all that. The suggested forces to play against, I think, is uber fun. I mean, it just is what it's all about. And giving you different locations to play in, I think is a win. Now, as far as I was mentioning who's it for, the thing is about this book, it's for people who want to play solo. It's for people who want to play with a friend. It's for people who want to play with groups, because there are multiplayer rules in here. It's just for everybody, you know, and this whole time you are going to be fighting not only your opponent, meaning Imperials and Stormcloaks, but also monsters and Dwemer stuff. And like all of those things still operate in the game as normal. So it just has a lot of life in it for being so cheap. I'm getting a little long-winded here, but to be simple, like, I really have been falling in love with this game. I bought this book right before I went on a trip with some family. They were having a surgery, so I was just hanging out and chilling in the lobby and read through the whole thing. And I just, Act 2 gets a little bit nebulous when it comes to everyone fighting over random territories, and you can totally fight in places where there's no real action happening, like where the two main bases aren't located or anywhere near. But aside from that one getting a little nebulous, I like the 3-act structure for sure. The idea of consequences is a big deal. So to give you a sense of how that all works, at the end of Act 1, whoever wins the game for Whiterun owns Whiterun. And so that actually matters significantly when it comes to Act 2 and the battle map is presented and you have to start choosing territories to fight over. As that's happening, the territories that you control also have a big difference on what's going on in the game world, because then it opens up new avenues of attack and defender and all these kinds of deals, and just new regions you have to play in. Act 3 I thought was a good representation of when you're doing those big assaults on the home bases of the various factions. You know, whenever I play Skyrim, I tend to lean towards playing Imperials for lore purposes, but I think in some playthroughs I'm definitely going to lean towards Stormcloaks because I like their models a lot and I think they're very fun. I was doing a painting stream recently and I asked folks, like, what hold should I paint to have Holdguard? Essentially, you would just buy the Stormcloak kit and paint them in their tabards or whatever in different colors to represent the different holds of Skyrim. And I got a whole bunch of answers. Haven't quite decided yet. Riften is my favorite place in terms of like an actual specific city, but the Reach is my favorite region, so I don't know. The game also has the Dark Brotherhood, which I hope to use quite a bit. So for example, I have one painted right here, and I'm excited to get these guys on the table. I think that they are exceptionally cool models. They work a little different than the other factions, but they are a playable faction within the game. When you combine all of the options that you have available to you with Call to Arms, you can create a very in-depth battle. By that I mean, you have your side quests where you're looking for resources and glory and all that kind of deal. You can hire assassins like Dark Brotherhood to go take out priority targets from your opponent. Maybe it's, you know, the Holdguard. Get rid of him because we need these defenses to fall. Like, that's a cool idea. You can also go on side quests to obtain super cool artifacts of power and all this jazz. There's just a lot of cool things that you can do once you start putting in all the options. And I guess that's kind of how I feel about Call to Arms, is that the mechanisms for any story that you want to tell are there. You just have to put them together, right? It's just a lot of tools that you don't necessarily have to use them all, but if you put them together in the right way, you can recreate anything you want. And the Civil War of the Stormcloaks is no exception. I'm going to start covering the game here much more on the channel because I'm very excited about it, and now that I have a bunch of stuff painted and ready to display, I would very much appreciate the chance to show it to you. If you're interested in anything in particular regarding Call to Arms, let me know in the comments down below. I'm going to be doing faction reviews, maybe some lore videos, something like that, and just working my way towards it because I just think it's a fascinating game and the models are dope. So anyway, friends, thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.